Wow!
In 1968, the surgeon Hister Richard Hornberger, using the nom de plume of Richard Hooker, collaborated with the writer Wilfred Charles Hines to create the book MASH, a novel about 3 army doctors based on his experiences with the 8055th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital during the Korean War. 2 years later, Robert Altman used the book as the basis for a movie about the fictional 4077th unit. He cut the number 8055 in half. 2 years after that, MASH came to life again in the form of an 11-season television series. And 35 years ago today, that show culminated in the most-watched series final in television history. Alan Alda and Jamie Farr served in the US Army. Alda, Hokie Pierce, was in the Army Reserve for 6 months in Korea. Farr enlisted and was stationed in Japan when Red Skelton requested his services on his USO tour through Korea. Wayne Rogers, Trapper John McIntyre, joined the US Navy for a time as a ship navigator, and Mike Farrell, Vijay Honeycutt, served in the US Marine Corps. According to screenwriter Ken Levin, while some shows were the result of creative genius, they actually got a lot of their plot lines from conducting interviews and research from doctors, nurses, and patients who lived through the Korean War experience. They chose the best stories they could find, focusing on the most emotional moments that could also be used in comedy. Some of the storylines were so outrageous, the screenwriters either had to tone them down or abandon the idea completely, thinking no one would believe it. Robert Klein, who was a famous comedian at the time, was asked to be on MASH when the show first aired. He was picked to play the part of Trapper John, but decided to turn down the role in the end, despite rumors and reports that he regretted the decision to not take the role. It turns out he was still okay with turning down the major role. Clean Stevenson is the man we will all remember for playing the role of Blake, but the television show was adapted from the 1970 feature film MASH, and in the movie, Roger Bowen also played the same role. Stevenson TV series died on February 15, 1996, and Bowen, from film, died on February 16, 1996. What's more, their deaths were eerily similar to each other. Both men died due to heart attacks. When Bowen died, his family was concerned that the news would get him mixed up with the reports of Stevenson's death, so they waited a week before announcing it. Though some say the family waited out of respect and to honor the connection Stevenson had with Bowen. The screenwriter Larry Calbert was the one who was tapped to convert MASH the book into MASH the movie, and ultimately MASH the TV series. He had lived and worked in Hollywood for a while before he grew sick of the city, moving to dreary London. But when he was asked to write the pilot for the show, he jumped at the opportunity and wrote the entire pilot in 2 days. For that, he received $25,000. Captain Honeycutt, played by Mike Farrell, was always known as BJ in the show, but the real name behind his initials was never given. At least that's what most people will remember. There was one episode, however, where Hokie went to extreme lengths to learn what his initials stand for, and towards the end, Honeycutt explains that his parents' names are B and J, claiming that this is the reason for his odd name. But whether it is actually true was never officially made clear. The show was limited to filming everything in 1 day on the ranch per episode. As a result, writers could draft up no more than 6 or 8 pages for these scenes, depending on the time of the year and how much daylight they had. In fact, once daylight savings time was over, they were forced to film any exteriors shot on a stage at Fox Studios. As you might imagine, this 1-day restriction made it difficult for directors to capture all of the emotional comedy the audience was expecting. and yet somehow they still managed to put it off. Most viewers would remember the voice of Todd Sussman. His echoes would resonate the halls as he would make announcements on the PA system throughout the show. However, many of the die-hard fans may remember his brief cameo in 1974 episode Operation Noselift. Sussman played the role of Private Danny Baker, who was caught going AWOL because of his huge nose. In the episode, Hockey called in an old body and plastic surgeon to perform the surgery in exchange for a date with the Barracuda. The plot thickened because elective surgery was against military regulations, so the episode was centered around whether or not Private Baker would get his new nose. Does anyone remember what happened? Bonus fact: Max Klinger was also only supposed to be in one episode. Jamie Farr's character was also supposed to be gay. In fact, many of Klinger's early dresses were based on Hollywood movie stars like Judy Garland, Vivien Leigh, and Betty Grable.